The door slammed. Sterling Vance didn't look up from his phone. He never did. The espresso machine hissed behind him, chrome and glass catching the early light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows on the 47th floor. "Watch it." The warning came sharp. Malachi Raines stopped mid-step, his cleaning cart inches from Sterling's Italian leather shoes. "Sorry." Malachi's voice barely registered above the ambient hum of the building's ventilation system. Sterling smirked, still scrolling. "You know what sorry gets you in this business, Raines? Exactly where you are right now." Laughter erupted from the cluster of junior analysts nearby. 3 of them. Always 3. Marcus Whitmore adjusted his tie, performative. Jasmine Shin sipped her latte, eyes flickering between her boss and the janitor. Derek Pullman checked his Rolex like he had somewhere important to be. He didn't. Before we continue this wonderful story, click subscribe, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're listening from. Now let's get to where the story began. Malachi moved his cart 3 feet left. The wheels squeaked against marble that cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. He reached for the trash bin beneath the espresso bar. "Careful with that," Marcus called out. "We wouldn't want you straining yourself on actual work." More laughter. Malachi's hand stayed steady. He lifted the bag, tied it, replaced it with a fresh liner. His movements carried the efficiency of repetition, the invisible choreography of someone who'd done this exact routine 263 times. He was counting. Sterling finally looked up. His eyes held the particular coldness of someone who'd never been told no. "You ever think about doing something else with your life, Raines?" The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Malachi met his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Long enough to acknowledge. Short enough to seem deferential. "Every day, sir." "I bet you do." Sterling's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, keep at it. Someone's got to keep this place clean while the rest of us actually build wealth." The junior analyst shifted. Jasmine looked away first. Derek laughed on cue. Marcus pulled out his phone, already composing what would become a company Slack message within the hour. Malachi pushed his cart toward the hallway. His steel-toed boots made no sound against the floor. Behind him, the conversation shifted to football spreads and weekend plans in the Hamptons. They thought he'd stopped listening. He hadn't. In the service corridor, Malachi paused. He pulled a small notebook from his uniform pocket. Black leather, worn at the edges. Inside, columns of numbers filled the pages in precise handwriting. Not cleaning schedules. Not supply inventories. Cash flow projections. Debt covenants. Interest rate curves. He added a single notation beneath today's date. Sterling, overconfident. Market position, unchanged. Timeline, accelerating. The notebook disappeared back into his pocket. Through the corridor window, Manhattan stretched out below. The city looked different from 47 floors up. Smaller. More manageable. Like a problem that could be solved with the right variables and enough patience. Malachi had both. His phone buzzed. A news alert from the Federal Reserve. He read it twice, then deleted it. The information was already cataloged in his mind, cross-referenced against 3 years of financial modeling he'd been building in the hours between midnight and dawn. The espresso machine hissed again in the distance. Sterling's voice carried through the open door, confident and careless. "I'm telling you, rates aren't going anywhere. The Fed's bluffing." Malachi's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on the card handle. Because Sterling was wrong. The rates were moving. And when they did, the entire architecture of Ashford Towers financing would collapse like dominoes in slow motion. Malachi had run the numbers 47 different ways. Every simulation ended the same. Default. Foreclosure. Transfer of ownership. He resumed pushing the cart down the corridor. At 6:15 a.m., the building was still mostly empty. Just security, a few early traders, and the cleaning crew that nobody looked at long enough to remember. Invisibility had advantages. People said things around him they'd never say in a boardroom. They left documents on desks. Forgot to close browsers. Discussed strategy in elevators like he was furniture. For 3 years, Malachi had been the most informed person in Ashford Tower. Nobody knew. He turned the corner toward the executive wing. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, he could see the architectural model of Ashford Capital's next acquisition. A hotel chain in bankruptcy. Sterling's pet project. The one that would either make his career or end it. Malachi knew which one it would be. He also knew exactly when. The cartwheels squeaked again as he approached Sterling's office. The door stood open. Inside, papers covered the mahogany desk in organized chaos. Annual reports. Acquisition memos. A half-empty bottle of scotch that cost more than Malachi's car. And there, partially visible beneath a stack of contracts, the edge of a document Malachi had been waiting 3 months to see. The variable rate loan amendment. He glanced down the hallway. Empty. His hand moved to his pocket, pulled out his phone, angled it just right. Click. The camera sound was off. The photo was perfect. Malachi slipped the phone away and continued cleaning, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. But his pulse hammered against his throat, adrenaline mixing with something else. Not quite revenge. Preparation. At 7:30 a.m., he clocked out. The security guard nodded without looking up. Malachi walked 6 blocks to the subway, descended into the mechanical thunder of morning rush hour, and found a seat in the last car. He pulled out his phone. The photo was clear enough to read every word of the loan covenant. Every clause. Every trigger point that Ashford's legal team thought was safely negotiated. They'd missed something. A small thing. A technicality buried in subsection 12.4 about interest rate escalation and debt service coverage ratios. The kind of detail only someone with Malachi's background would catch. The kind of detail that would matter in exactly 42 days. He forwarded the photo to an encrypted email address. No message. No explanation needed. On the other end, someone was waiting. Someone who understood that buildings don't just house companies. They house leverage. And leverage, applied correctly, could move anything. Even a 47-story tower in the heart of Manhattan's financial district. The subway lurched forward, carrying Malachi toward Queens, toward his apartment, toward the second shift of his real work. Behind him, Sterling Vance was probably ordering his 3rd espresso, celebrating another successful morning of being exactly who he'd always been. Successful. Untouchable. Completely unaware that the man he'd just humiliated was about to become his landlord. What Sterling didn't know was that Malachi had already made the first move. Have you ever been underestimated? Drop a comment below. The Slack message appeared at 9:47 a.m. Marcus Whitmore had posted it in the general channel, where 312 employees could see it. A photo. Grainy, but recognizable. Malachi pushing his cleaning cart past the espresso bar, head down, shoulders rounded. The caption read, "When you're grinding but the grind is literally a mop." 17 laugh reactions in the first minute. Sterling saw it during a client call. He muted himself, grinned, added a fire emoji. The message spread. By 10:15, it had migrated to the private channels. The ones reserved for senior staff. The ones where political careers were made and destroyed over coffee orders and seating arrangements. Jasmine Shin stared at her screen in the glass-walled office she shared with 2 other associates. Her finger hovered over the laugh react button. She didn't press it. Derek Pullman did, though. Then he screenshot the whole thread and texted it to his friend at Goldman Sachs with the message, "Culture here is undefeated." 3 floors below, in the document processing center, an intern named Keisha Morrison saw the post. She'd started 2 weeks ago, fresh out of Howard University with a finance degree and $40,000 in student debt. She'd passed Malachi in the hallway that morning. He'd held the door for her when her hands were full of case files. She closed Slack without reacting. At 11:30, Sterling called an impromptu team meeting. The acquisitions group filed into the corner conference room, the one with views of the East River and leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Sterling stood at the head of the table, confident in the way only trust fund confidence could manufacture. "All right, listen up. I want everyone sharp on the Meridian Hotel pitch. We're presenting to the board Thursday, and I need this airtight. Marcus pulled up the presentation on the wall-mounted screen. 93 slides. Financial models that promised 18% returns. Risk assessments that conveniently ignored everything inconvenient. Financing structure looks solid, Derek said, scrolling through the debt schedule. Variable rate, sure, but we're locking in at current levels. Even if rates tick up, we've got cushion. Sterling nodded. Exactly. The Fed's not moving aggressively. Everyone's panicking over nothing. Jasmine flipped through her copy of the memo. Her eyes caught on a footnote in the covenant section. Something about debt service coverage ratios and escalation clauses. She opened her mouth, closed it. Sterling was already moving on. Marcus, you're handling the presentation intro. Derek, you're on the financial walkthrough. Jasmine, I need you on Q&A prep. Anticipate every objection. The meeting ran 90 minutes. By the end, everyone had assignments. Everyone had deadlines. Nobody had mentioned the loan covenants again. At 1 p.m., the espresso machine ritual resumed. It always happened after lunch. The acquisitions team gathered like clockwork, caffeine and conversation flowing in equal measure. Today, the conversation turned personal. You see that Knicks game last night? Marcus asked, dumping 3 sugars into his Americano. Painful, Derek said. My cousin had courtside seats. Posted about it for like 6 hours straight. Must be nice. Marcus stirred his drink. Some people just have it easy, you know? Born into the right zip code, right connections. Sterling leaned against the counter. That's the game. You either understand it or you don't. Speaking of people who don't understand, Derek said, voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Rain still thinks hard work equals success. Like this is 1,950 or something. Laughter. Not loud. Just enough to establish the pecking order. The elevator chimed. Malachi stepped out, cart in tow. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Marcus saw him first. Hey Rains, question for you. Malachi stopped. Yes. You ever think about, like, upward mobility? Career development. The question was designed to wound. Everyone in the espresso cluster knew it. Malachi's face remained neutral. Sometimes. Yeah. Sterling joined in, sensing blood in the water. What's your 5-year plan look like? Head janitor. Derek couldn't contain himself. The laugh came out sharp and ugly. Jasmine studied her phone screen like it held the secrets of the universe. Malachi adjusted his grip on the card handle. His knuckles didn't whiten. His jaw didn't clench. Nothing in his body language suggested the question had landed. I'm working towards something, he said quietly. Aren't we all? Sterling's smile was all teeth. Difference is, some of us are built for the climb, and some of us are built to support it. Nothing wrong with knowing which one you are. Marcus raised his coffee cup in mock salute. Respect the honesty. Malachi nodded once. Then he continued past them, cartwheels tracking across the marble floor toward the executive wing. Behind him, the conversation shifted immediately. Did you see his face? Derek whispered. Completely blank. Like talking to a wall. That's survival instinct, Sterling said. He knows better than to react. Smart enough to keep his head down, at least. Still, Marcus said, you gotta wonder what goes through someone's head in that position. Like, does he go home and just accept it? Or does he tell himself stories about making it big someday? Jasmine set her cup down harder than necessary. Maybe we should focus on the meridian pitch. The men looked at her. What? Sterling's tone shifted. Not quite hostile. Testing. Nothing. Just thinking we have a board presentation in 3 days. We've got time. Sterling checked his watch. Patek Philippe. Anniversary gift from his father. Besides, little bit of team bonding never hurt anyone. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes. Markets. Politics. Weekend plans. Normal things. Comfortable things. The kind of things people discuss when they've never had to question whether they belong in the room. At 2:30, Malachi was in the service corridor again. His phone was out. Not the personal one. The other one. The one connected to an email address that didn't have his name attached to it. He typed quickly. Confirmed. Covenant language allows acceleration if DSCR falls below 1.2x for 2 consecutive quarters. Current trajectory puts them at 1.15x by Q2. Interest rate increase would push them to 1.08x. Default trigger, 67 days maximum. He hit send. The response came back in 40 seconds. Acquisition vehicle ready. Waiting on your signal. Malachi deleted both messages. Through the corridor window, he could see into the conference room where Sterling's team was still gathered. They were laughing about something. Probably another joke. Another moment of casual cruelty that would evaporate as soon as it was spoken. They thought they were untouchable. They thought the building belonged to them. They thought a lot of things that were about to stop being true. Malachi pocketed the phone and returned to his cart. He had 4 more floors to clean before his shift ended. 4 more floors of listening to people who didn't know they were talking to the only person in the building who understood exactly how fragile their world actually was. At 4 p.m., Keisha Morrison approached the espresso machine. She'd been avoiding it all day, but she needed caffeine to get through the rest of her case file review. Marcus was there. Alone this time. "Hey," he said, friendly enough. "You're new, right?" 2 weeks. Keisha focused on the machine buttons. "Finance track." "Yeah. Good program here. Tough, but good. Sterling's intense, but you learn a lot." Keisha nodded, waiting for her coffee to finish brewing. "You see that Slack message earlier?" Marcus asked. "The one about the janitor?" Her hand paused on the cup. "I saw it. Pretty funny, right? I mean, no disrespect to the guy, but come on. You gotta have a sense of humor about these things." Keisha picked up her coffee. "I guess." "You guess?" She looked at him directly. "I don't know him, so I don't really have an opinion." Marcus blinked. "Fair enough." She walked away before he could continue the conversation. Back at her desk, she pulled up the covenant section of the Meridian deal memo again. That footnote kept bothering her. The one about escalation clauses. She opened a new spreadsheet and started running numbers. Just to see. Just to check. At 5:12 p.m., Malachi clocked out for the day. The security guard was different this time. Younger. New. "Have a good one," the guard said, actually looking at him. "You too." Outside, the February air cut through his jacket. Malachi walked the 6 blocks to the subway, descended into the evening rush, found his usual spot in the last car. He didn't pull out his phone this time. He just watched the tunnel walls blur past, concrete and darkness and the occasional flash of station lights. In 67 days, everything would change. Sterling didn't know it yet. Marcus didn't know it. Derek and Jasmine and the 312 employees of Ashford Capital Partners didn't know it. But somewhere in a boutique investment office in Delaware, a company called Rain Strategic Holdings was preparing paperwork that would rearrange the entire power structure of a 47-story building. And the man who mopped its floors was the only one who saw it coming. What nobody at Ashford realized was that Malachi wasn't just cleaning the building. Would you speak up if you saw someone being treated this way? Let me know in the comments. The apartment in Queens was exactly what someone would expect a janitor to afford. Small. Functional. A kitchen that could barely fit 2 people. A living room with a couch from Craigslist and a television that still had buttons. Malachi set his keys on the counter at 6:45 p.m. The silence felt intentional. He opened the refrigerator. Leftover rice and chicken from Tuesday. A half-empty carton of orange juice. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that suggested anything beyond exactly what his W-2 would indicate. He ate standing up, looking out the window at the building across the street. Lights were coming on in apartments. People arriving home. Normal lives. Normal problems. His phone rang. Not the work phone. The other one. Malachi. The voice on the other end was female, precise. "I got your update. And the timeline's aggressive. 67 days doesn't give us much room for complications." Malachi set his fork down. "There won't be complications. The covenant language is clear. The debt structure is exactly what I told you it would be. I'm not questioning your analysis." A pause. "I'm questioning whether you're ready for what comes after." "I've been ready for 10 years. Have you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Because once we execute, there's no walking it back. You understand that, right? This isn't just about buying a building. You're going to own the ground beneath people who've spent years treating you like you don't exist. Good. The woman on the other end exhaled. All right. I'll have the legal team start drafting the acquisition documents. We'll need your signature on the guarantee by end of week. You'll have it. And Malachi? Yeah. Don't do anything that draws attention. Not yet. The moment they realize someone's watching, they'll lock everything down. Understood. The call ended. Malachi stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to his ear. Then he set it down, finished his dinner, and walked to the second bedroom. It wasn't a bedroom anymore. 3 monitors occupied a desk that ran the length of one wall. Financial data streamed across the screens in real time. Stock tickers, bond yields, interest rate futures. The kind of setup that would look more at home in a hedge fund than a janitor's apartment. Because it had been in a hedge fund. 10 years ago, Malachi sat down. His fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory that hadn't faded despite years away from the industry. He pulled up a file labeled Ashford_structural_analysis_V47. The spreadsheet contained 3 years of data, revenue projections, expense ratios, debt schedules, everything publicly available, cross-referenced with everything he'd overheard in elevators and conference rooms and late-night conversations when executives thought the cleaning crew had already left. The numbers told a story. Ashford Capital Partners was bleeding. Not obviously. Not in a way that would show up in quarterly earnings or investor updates. But the underlying structure was rotten. The Meridian Hotel acquisition was supposed to save them. A distressed asset purchase that would generate quick returns and stabilize the portfolio. But it was funded entirely with variable rate debt, and the Federal Reserve had just signaled 3 rate hikes in the next 6 months. Malachi ran the numbers again, not because he needed to, because the precision was satisfying. At current rates, debt service coverage ratio of 1.15x. After first rate hike, 1.09x. After second, 1.03x. After third, 0.97x. Below the 1.2x covenant threshold. Default. He leaned back in his chair. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the computer fans and the distant sound of traffic outside. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. 10 years ago, Malachi Rains had been on track to make partner at Harrington & Cole, a quantitative hedge fund in Chicago. Youngest analyst in the firm's history. Brilliant at modeling risk. Even better at finding inefficiencies in distressed debt markets. He'd been 28 and unstoppable. Then his sister got sick. Lupus. Aggressive. The kind that required experimental treatments and specialists who didn't take insurance. The bills came fast. Faster than savings could handle. Faster than his salary could cover, even with bonuses. He'd liquidated everything. His 401k. His stock options. The small investment account he'd been building since college. It wasn't enough. So he'd taken out loans. Personal loans. High interest. The kind that come with payment schedules that look manageable on paper until they're not. His sister survived. His career didn't. The debt consumed everything. He couldn't focus. Couldn't perform. The models that used to come easy started requiring twice as long to build. His boss noticed. Then his colleagues. Then the whispers started. By the time he resigned, it was a formality. He moved to New York because it was far enough away from Chicago to feel like a reset. Took the first job he could find that offered steady paychecks and didn't require background checks that would reveal the financial crater he was climbing out of. Ashford Tower needed a night janitor. Malachi needed to disappear. It worked. For 3 years, he'd been invisible. Just another service worker in a city full of people who performed labor that kept the machinery of wealth running without ever benefiting from it. Except Malachi wasn't planning to stay invisible. He was planning something else entirely. He pulled up another file. This one was labeled RHE_capital_structure. Rains Holdings Enterprise. The LLC he'd registered in Delaware 18 months ago. Shell company. Modest capitalization. Nothing that would trigger regulatory scrutiny. But connected to a network of investors he'd cultivated quietly over years of strategic conversation and careful relationship building. People who understood distressed debt. People who knew that the best acquisitions happened when nobody else was paying attention. People who were willing to bet on a former hedge fund analyst with a chip on his shoulder and a photographic memory for financial statements. The plan was simple. Wait for Ashford to default. Acquire the distressed debt at discount. Trigger foreclosure. Take ownership of the building. And then, when Sterling Vance and Marcus Whitmore and every other person who'd treated him like furniture realized what had happened, Malachi would be standing in the conference room they thought belonged to them. As their landlord, he closed the file. Outside, the city continued its evening rhythm. Sirens in the distance. Someone's car alarm going off. The mechanical groan of a garbage truck making its rounds. Malachi stood, stretched, and walked back to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water and looked at the calendar on his refrigerator. 67 days. Just over 2 months. 10 weeks of continuing to push a cleaning cart through marble hallways while the people around him made jokes about his intelligence and his future and his worth as a human being. He could last 10 weeks. He'd already lasted 3 years. His phone buzzed again. A text message from an unknown number. Documents ready for review. Check your secure email. Malachi opened his laptop. The encrypted email contained a PDF. 47 pages of acquisition agreements, debt purchase contracts, and foreclosure procedures. Everything legally airtight. Everything designed to execute quickly once the trigger conditions were met. He read through every page, made 3 notes in the margins, sent it back with his approval. At 10:30 p.m., he finally went to bed. Sleep came easily. It always did when you knew exactly what was coming. The next morning, Malachi arrived at Ashford Tower at 5:12 a.m. Same as always. The security guard nodded without looking up. Same as always. The elevator carried him to the 47th floor. Same as always. But something was different. In the main conference room, someone had left the lights on. Papers were scattered across the table. A laptop sat open, screen still glowing. Malachi pushed his cart closer. The laptop displayed a spreadsheet. The Meridian Hotel financial model. And there, highlighted in yellow, was the debt service coverage calculation. Someone had been checking the numbers. Someone had noticed the same thing Malachi had noticed. He pulled out his phone, took a photo, then continued down the hallway. By the time Sterling arrived at 8 a.m., the conference room was clean and the laptop was closed. But whoever had been working late was asking the right questions. And that meant Malachi's timeline just got more complicated. What Sterling didn't know was that the person asking questions worked 3 floors below him. Have you ever had to start over from scratch? Drop a comment about resilience. The Federal Reserve announcement came at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Interest rates up 50 basis points. Immediate effect. The trading floor at Ashford Capital erupted in controlled chaos. Phones ringing. Screens flashing red. Analysts recalculating positions that had been stable 20 minutes ago. Sterling stood in his office, watching through the glass walls as his team scrambled. His phone buzzed. Text from the CEO, conference room. Now, the executive team gathered in 8 minutes. 3 floors below, Keisha Morrison was running the same numbers in a spreadsheet that was starting to look uncomfortably similar to Malachi's model. She'd been working on it for 3 days. Not because anyone asked her to, because the footnote in the Meridian memo wouldn't leave her alone. Now, with the Fed announcement, her projections were flashing red. Current DSCR, 1.09x. Below threshold. She stared at the number. Then she did what every good analyst does when they find something that doesn't make sense. She checked her work again. Same result. She pulled up the covenant language. Read it 3 times. The acceleration clause was unambiguous. If debt service coverage fell below 1.2x for 2 consecutive quarters, the lenders could call the entire loan. Ashford would have to pay back $470 million. Immediately, they didn't have $470 million in liquid assets, which meant Keisha sat back in her chair. This wasn't just a bad deal. This was a company-ending event waiting to happen. She looked around the open floor plan. Other analysts were working. Normal Wednesday afternoon. Coffee cups and keyboards and the ambient noise of people who thought tomorrow would look like today. They had no idea. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. Who do you tell when you discover the company you work for is about to implode? At 5:12 p.m., Malachi clocked in for his evening shift. The building felt different. Tension in the air like humidity before a thunderstorm. He pushed his cart through the trading floor. Analysts were still at their desks, unusual for this time of day. Screens showed the same red numbers. The same calculations that were happening in boardrooms and risk committees across Manhattan. Nobody looked at him. Good. He continued to the executive wing. Sterling's office was empty, but the lights were on. Papers covered the desk. The Meridian file. The covenant documents. Handwritten notes in the margins. Malachi cleaned around them carefully. One note caught his eye. Renegotiate or restructure? Timeline critical. 60 days max. 60 days. Malachi's timeline said 67. Sterling was 7 days too optimistic. He finished the office and moved to the conference room. Someone had been working here too. A whiteboard covered in financial calculations. Debt schedules. Cash flow projections. 3 different scenarios, all color-coded. Red, red, red. Malachi took a photo with his work phone this time. The one that would show he was documenting cleaning completion if anyone asked. Nobody would ask. At 7:30 p.m., most of the building had emptied. Just security and the late-shift traders monitoring Asian markets. And Keisha Morrison, still at her desk on the 44th floor. Malachi's cart passed her on the way to the elevator. She looked up. Their eyes met for half a second. She looked exhausted. He nodded, kept moving. Behind him, Keisha returned to her spreadsheet. She'd made a decision. Tomorrow morning, she was taking this to her supervisor. At 9 p.m., Malachi was back in his apartment in Queens. He opened his laptop. The photo from Sterling's office was already uploaded to his encrypted drive. Renegotiate or restructure. Timeline critical. 60 days max. Sterling was trying to save the deal, which meant Malachi needed to make sure he failed. Not obviously. Not in a way that could be traced back to anyone. Just strategically. He pulled up his contact list. Found a name he hadn't called in 18 months. The phone rang 4 times. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. The voice was male. Late 50s. Someone who'd been in distressed debt longer than Malachi had been alive. I need information, Malachi said. Don't you always? Ashford Capital Partners. Meridian Hotel Acquisition. Who holds the senior debt? Silence on the other end. The sound of typing. 3 lenders. JP Morgan has 60%. Vanguard Credit has 30%. The last 10% is. More typing. Interesting. What? Small fund out of Delaware. Rain Strategic Holdings. Malachi smiled. Thanks. Malachi. Yeah. Whatever you're doing, be careful. These people don't forget. I'm counting on it. He ended the call. The pieces were moving exactly how he'd planned them. His shell company already owned 10% of the debt. Small enough to avoid scrutiny. Large enough to block any restructuring that required unanimous lender consent. Sterling could renegotiate with JP Morgan and Vanguard all he wanted. But Malachi had veto power, and he was going to use it. At 11 p.m., his secure email pinged. New message from the investment group backing his acquisition. Subject line. Ready to proceed on your signal. Malachi typed a response. Not yet. Let them try to save it first. Timeline, 45 days. He hit send. Then he opened a different file. This one wasn't financial models or acquisition documents. It was a list of names. Every person who'd made a joke about his intelligence. Every person who'd treated him like he was invisible. Every person who'd assumed that a janitor uniform meant his mind didn't matter. Sterling Vance was at the top. Marcus Whitmore. Derek Pullman. 37 other names. Malachi wasn't planning revenge. He was planning a lesson. By midnight, he was asleep. 60 days until everything changed. But in Sterling's office, the lights stayed on until 3 a.m. Because some people could feel when the ground was shifting beneath them. They just didn't know who was moving it. The next morning, Keisha Morrison walked into her supervisor's office with a printout of her analysis. She never made it to the meeting. Because overnight, someone had deleted every file related to the Meridian Covenant analysis from the shared drive. Have you ever discovered something at work that nobody wanted you to find? Share your story. The email came at 6:47 a.m. Subject: Urgent, Meridian Deal Review. All hands meeting. Conference room. 9 a.m. sharp. No agenda attached. That was the first sign something was wrong. Keisha arrived at 8:55 with her printed analysis and a backup USB drive. The conference room was already filling. Senior staff, junior analysts, even people from operations who never attended deal meetings. Margaret Chin stood at the head of the table. No laptop, no presentation materials, just her in a single folder. Close the door, she said. Someone did. Margaret waited until the room settled. 32 people. Every person who'd touched the Meridian acquisition in any capacity. I'm going to ask a question, Margaret said. And I need honest answers. Pause. Who's been running unauthorized analysis on our debt covenants? Silence. Keisha's hand tightened on her printout. Because, Margaret continued, sometime between yesterday at 5 and this morning at 6, someone accessed our secure financial drive and deleted 14 files related to covenant compliance. The access log shows it came from an internal terminal. She opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper. The terminal was registered to Keisha Morrison. Every head turned. Keisha felt her face go hot. I didn't delete anything. But you did access the files? Yes. I was reviewing the Meridian structure, and I noticed. You noticed what? The debt service coverage ratio. With the Fed rate hike, we're below the covenant threshold. I wanted to verify the numbers before I brought it to anyone. Margaret studied her. And did you share this analysis with anyone outside the company? No. Email it. Text it. Mention it in casual conversation. No. I only have it printed here and on a backup drive. Show me. Keisha handed over both. Margaret reviewed the spreadsheet in silence. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. She looked up at Sterling. Is this accurate? Sterling had gone pale. We're working on revised projections that. Is it accurate? Currently, yes. But, then why wasn't I informed immediately? I was handling it. We have options. Renegotiation pathways. I didn't want to create panic until. Until what? Until the lenders called the debt. Margaret's voice cut through the room like a blade. We're in breach of covenant, Sterling. Do you understand what that means? It's manageable. It's a crisis. Margaret turned to the room. Everyone who doesn't directly report to me out. Now, 20 people stood and filed out in silence. Keisha was halfway to the door when Margaret spoke. Not you, Morrison. Sit. Keisha sat. Now it was just Margaret, Sterling, Derek, Marcus, and her. Margaret pulled up her phone. Made a call on speaker. Legal? I need you in the executive conference room. Bring everything we have on the Meridian debt package. She hung up. 3 minutes of silence. Then the door opened. Ashford's general counsel entered with a paralegal carrying 2 file boxes. Walk me through the covenant structure, Margaret said. The next 40 minutes were technical. Clause-by-clause review of loan agreements, acceleration triggers, lender consent requirements. Keisha watched Sterling's confidence evaporate in real time. Because the more they reviewed, the worse it got. The debt was callable if DSCR fell below threshold for 2 consecutive quarters. They were already in Q1 breach. Q2 projections showed they'd be even further below, which meant in 60 days, the lenders could demand full repayment. Can we renegotiate? Margaret asked. Theoretically, the general counsel said, but it requires unanimous lender consent. All 3 debt holders have to agree. What are the chances? JP Morgan will probably work with us. Vanguard. He hesitated. Harder to say, but both of them prefer modification to foreclosure. And the third lender? The paralegal checked her notes. Small fund. Rain Strategic Holdings. They own 10%. Get them on the phone. We've tried. They're not responding to outreach. Margaret's jaw tightened. What do you mean they're not responding? Radio silence. We've sent emails, called their registered office number. Nothing. Who the hell are they? Delaware, LLC. Limited public information. Registered agent is a corporate services firm. No obvious beneficial owners listed. Margaret turned to Sterling. You didn't vet the lenders before closing? They came through the syndication process. J.P. Morgan brought them in. We assumed. Don't assume. Find out who they are and what they want. The meeting continued for another hour. By the end, the strategy was clear. Contact all 3 lenders, propose covenant modification, offer additional collateral or higher interest rates to sweeten the deal. They had 45 days to get it done. Keisha was dismissed with a warning to keep everything confidential and a grudging acknowledgement that her analysis had been correct. She left the conference room at 11:30 a.m., walked directly to the bathroom, and locked herself in a stall. Her hands were shaking. 3 floors up, Malachi was cleaning the executive wing. He'd heard nothing about the emergency meeting. Didn't need to, because the meeting was happening exactly how he'd predicted it would. Sterling would panic. Margaret would scramble. They'd reach out to lenders. J.P. Morgan would negotiate. Vanguard would hesitate. And Rain Strategic Holdings would say no. At 1 p.m., Malachi's encrypted phone buzzed. Message from the investment group. Ashford's counsel reached out, requesting modification discussion. Your instructions? Malachi typed back. No response. Let them wait. 3 dots appeared. Then, understood. Timeline still 45 days. 43 now, Malachi corrected. Start preparing foreclosure documents. He deleted the message thread and returned to work. That afternoon, Sterling made 12 phone calls trying to reach someone, anyone, at Rain Strategic Holdings. Every call went to voicemail. Every email bounced back with an automated response. It was like calling a ghost. By 4 p.m., he was desperate enough to ask the intern to search public records for anything connected to the company. Keisha, walking past his office, heard him on the phone. I don't care what it takes. Find out who owns that fund. There has to be a paper trail somewhere. She kept walking. At 5:12 p.m., Malachi clocked out. The security guard looked up this time. Hey, you hear about the meeting this morning? What meeting? Whole executive team. Real tense. Something about a deal going bad. Malachi shook his head. News to me. Yeah, figured. Just weird energy in the building today. There usually is when rich people lose money. The guard laughed. Truth. Malachi walked out into the February evening. 6 blocks to the subway. Down into the platform. Last car, same as always. He pulled out his personal phone. Opened a message thread with his sister. Her, how's work? Him, same as always. How are you feeling? Her, good day today. Doctor said numbers look stable. Him, good. I'll call you this weekend. Her, love you. Him, love you too. He put the phone away. 43 days until his sister's medical bills were ancient history. 43 days until every person who'd looked through him like he was furniture learned what it felt like to be disposable. 43 days until the invisible man became impossible to ignore. The subway lurched forward, carrying Malachi toward Queens. Behind him, Sterling Vance was still in his office, still making phone calls, still trying to find a way to save a deal that was already dead. He just didn't know he was negotiating with the janitor. What Sterling would never discover was that the paralegal searching public records had found something. A name buried in 3 layers of corporate filings. Have you ever felt invisible at work? Comment below. The video went viral at 11:23 p.m. Someone had recorded the town hall from 3 weeks ago. Sterling's joke about the janitor understanding compound interest. The camera caught Malachi in the background, perfectly still, holding a trash bag. The clip was 14 seconds long. By midnight, it had 60,000 views on Twitter. By 2 a.m., 230,000. News outlets picked it up by morning. Wall Street executive mocks janitor in leaked video. The headline wrote itself. Sterling's phone started ringing at 6:15 a.m. Not from Margaret. From the PR firm Ashford kept on retainer for crisis management. We need a statement, the publicist said. This is spreading fast. It was a joke. Taken out of context. Context doesn't matter when you're trending for the wrong reasons. I'm drafting an apology. You need to approve it within the hour. Sterling sat on the edge of his bed, watching his mentions multiply on his phone screen. Most of them weren't kind. Eat the rich appeared 47 times in the replies. By 8 a.m., the office was buzzing. Not with work, with whispers. Marcus deleted the original Slack post. Too late. Screenshots lived forever. Jasmine avoided the espresso machine entirely. Derek pretended he'd never laughed at anything Sterling said. At 9:30, Margaret called Sterling into her office. Shut the door. He did. Do you understand what you've done? It was a private comment. Someone leaked it. Nothing's private anymore, Sterling. Especially not when you're mocking the help in front of 30 people. Margaret pulled up her laptop. The video has been shared by 3 major news accounts. We're getting calls from reporters asking for comment. Our clients are texting me asking if this reflects company culture. It doesn't it? Margaret leaned back. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks exactly like the arrogance that got us into the Meridian mess. You thought you were untouchable. You thought nobody was watching. You were wrong on both counts. Sterling's jaw tightened. What do you want me to do? Apologize. Publicly. Today. To who? To Malachi Rains. The man you humiliated. Sterling's face went blank. You want me to apologize to the janitor? I want you to apologize to a human being you disrespected in front of colleagues. Do it sincerely or don't do it at all. But this doesn't go away until you make it right. The meeting ended. Sterling sat in his office for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Mr. Vance. Female voice. Professional. Unfamiliar. Yes. I'm calling from Rain Strategic Holdings. We received your outreach regarding covenant modification. Sterling straightened immediately. Yes. Thank you for getting back to us. We'd like to discuss restructuring terms that work for all parties. I'm afraid that won't be possible. I'm sorry. Our position is firm. No modifications. No extensions. If covenant breach continues into Q2, we'll be exercising our rights under the acceleration clause. Sterling's throat went dry. You understand that forces foreclosure? Nobody wins in that scenario. We disagree. Look, I don't know who you represent, but I'm happy to sweeten the offer. Higher interest rate. Additional collateral. Whatever it takes to make this work. Mr. Vance, this conversation is over. You'll receive formal notice of our position via certified mail within 48 hours. The line went dead. Sterling sat there, phone still pressed to his ear. Then he called Margaret. They said no. At 1 p.m., the apology video went live. Sterling, sitting in a generic office background, reading from a script approved by legal and PR. I want to sincerely apologize for comments I made that were disrespectful and inappropriate. There's no excuse for the way I spoke, and I'm committed to doing better. The video was 90 seconds long. The comments section was brutal. Too little too late. Apologize to his face, coward. You only apologized because you got caught. Malachi saw the video at 2:30 p.m. during his break in the service corridor. He watched it once. No expression. Then he deleted his watch history and went back to work. At 3 p.m., Keisha was called into Margaret's office again. I need you on the restructuring team, Margaret said. Full-time, starting now. We're fighting to save this company, and I need people who can see problems before they explode. What about my current assignments? Reassigned. This is priority 1. Sterling's handling lender negotiations, but I want independent verification on everything. You report directly to me. Keisha nodded. And Keisha? The person who deleted those files? We still don't know who it was. But if you find anything unusual, anything that doesn't add up, you come to me immediately. Understood. Understood. Back at her desk, Keisha pulled up the covenant files again. Something had been bothering her since the morning meeting. Rain Strategic Holdings. The name felt familiar somehow. Not from work. From somewhere else. She opened a browser. Typed it into the search bar. Limited results. Delaware, LLC. Registered agent information. Nothing useful. She tried a different approach. Searched for Rains plus Finance plus New York. 17 results. Most were irrelevant. Then one caught her eye. An old article from a Chicago business journal. 10 years old. Harrington and Cole analyst Malachi Rains departs firm. She clicked. The article was brief. Rising star. Quantitative analysis specialist. Resigned for personal reasons. There was a photo. Younger. Clean-shaven. Wearing a suit. But the eyes were the same. Keisha stared at the screen. No. It couldn't be. She pulled up Ashford's employee directory. Searched for Rains. One result. Malachi Rains. Janitorial staff. Employment start date. 3 years ago. She looked at the photo from the article again. Then she stood up, walked to the elevator, and rode it to the 47th floor. The executive wing was quiet. Most people were in meetings or avoiding Sterling. She found Malachi restocking paper towels in the bathroom near the conference room. Excuse me. He turned. Yes. Your name is Malachi Rains? That's right. Did you used to work at Harrington and Cole? In Chicago? His expression didn't change. Why do you ask? Because I just found an article from 10 years ago about a quantitative analyst named Malachi Rains who left the firm. Silence. That was you, wasn't it? Malachi set down the paper towels. You should get back to work. You're not just a janitor. Yes, I am. No. Keisha's voice dropped. You're not. And I think you know exactly what's happening with the Meridian deal. Malachi looked at her for a long moment. You're smart, he said quietly. Smarter than most people on that floor. So let me give you some advice. Whatever you think you figured out, keep it to yourself. Why? Because some things are better left alone. He picked up his supplies and walked past her. Keisha stood in the hallway, heart pounding. Then she pulled out her phone and took a screenshot of the article. At 5:12 p.m., Malachi clocked out. The security guard was different again. Older this time. Saw that video, the guard said. The one with you and that executive. Malachi paused. Yeah. Man's an idiot. You handled it with class. Thanks. People like that always get what's coming eventually. Malachi smiled. Small. Brief. They do. Outside, the February evening had turned bitter. Wind cut through the streets like knives. Malachi walked his usual route. 6 blocks. Down into the subway. But this time, someone followed. Keisha Morrison, staying 2 cars behind, watching through the window as Malachi took his seat in the last car. She didn't know what she was doing. Didn't know what she'd say if he noticed her. She just knew that something was happening that nobody else could see. And she needed to understand what it was. The subway carried them both toward Queens. Toward answers neither of them was ready for. Would you confront someone if you discovered their secret? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next in this story. The default notice arrived by courier at 9:47 a.m. Margaret signed for it personally. Thick envelope. Law firm letterhead. The weight of it felt deliberate. She opened it in her office with the door closed. 3 pages. Legal language. Bottom line clear. Ashford Capital Partners was officially in breach of covenant. Rains Strategic Holdings, as a debt holder, was exercising its right to accelerate the loan. Full repayment required within 30 days. $470 million. Due March 15th. Margaret read it twice. Then she called an emergency board meeting. By 11 a.m., the executive team was assembled. Board members on video conference. Lawyers on standby. We don't have 30 days of runway, the CFO said. Our liquid assets are tied up in active deals. We'd need to liquidate positions at massive losses to generate that kind of cash. What about emergency financing? One board member asked. Every bank we've approached wants collateral we can't provide without triggering other covenants. We're in a liquidity trap. Margaret looked at Sterling. The other lenders. JP Morgan and Vanguard. Can they buy out Rains Strategic? We're trying. But Rains won't negotiate. They won't even take meetings. Then we file for bankruptcy protection, another board member said. Chapter 11. Restructure under court supervision. That destroys the firm, Margaret said. Our reputation, our client relationships, everything we've built. Better than foreclosure. The room dissolved into argument. Voices overlapping. Options that weren't really options. Through the glass walls, employees watched. They couldn't hear the conversation, but they could read the body language. At 12:30, the meeting broke. No decision made. just the slow realization that they were out of moves. Sterling returned to his office and closed the door. He pulled up every contact he had in finance. Old colleagues, former clients, people who owed him favors. Nobody could help. The debt was too large, the timeline too short, the risk too concentrated. At 2 p.m., his assistant knocked. "Mr. Vance, there's someone here to see you." "I'm not taking meetings." "She says it's about Rain's strategic holdings." Sterling looked up. "Send her in." Keisha entered. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I know who owns Rain's strategic," she said. Sterling leaned forward. "Who?" "Malachi Rains, the janitor." Silence. Then Sterling laughed. Not humor. Disbelief. "That's impossible. I found a Business Journal article from 10 years ago. He used to be a quantitative analyst at a Chicago hedge fund, specialized in distressed debt. He left the industry and disappeared. 3 years ago, he started working here." "You're telling me our janitor is a former hedge fund analyst who bought our debt?" "I'm telling you the pieces fit. Same name, same background. He's been here for 3 years, watching everything, listening to everything." Sterling's face had gone pale. "This is insane." "Is it? Think about it. He knew exactly when to buy the debt, exactly how much to acquire to block restructuring. He's been in every meeting room, every office, every conversation where we discuss strategy." Sterling stood up, walked to the window. "If this is true, then he's been planning this the entire time." Sterling turned. "We need proof. Real proof. Not just a name match and a theory. I have the article. I have the employment records. What more do you need?" "I need to talk to him." At 3 p.m., Sterling went looking for Malachi. Found him on the 44th floor, emptying trash bins. "Rains." Malachi looked up. "Mr. Vance, I need to ask you something." "Okay. Did you used to work in finance?" Malachi's expression didn't change. "Why do you ask?" "Because someone showed me an article about a Malachi Rains who was an analyst in Chicago 10 years ago. That was a different person." "Was it?" "Yes." Sterling stepped closer. "Because if it wasn't, if you're the same person, then we need to talk about Rain's strategic holdings." Malachi set down the trash bag. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. You own the debt. You've been sabotaging our restructuring efforts." "I push a mop, Mr. Vance. I don't own anything except a studio apartment in Queens." "Then prove it. Show me you're not connected to that fund." "I don't have to prove anything to you." The hallway went quiet. Sterling's hands were shaking. "You're going to destroy this company." "No," Malachi said calmly. "You already did that. I'm just watching it happen." He picked up his trash bag and walked away. Sterling stood there, breathing hard. Then he pulled out his phone and called Margaret. "I just confronted Rains. He denied everything, but I know it's him. We need to act now." "Act how?" "Terminate him. Immediately. If he's orchestrating this, we can't have him in the building." "On what grounds?" "Being good at his job." "On grounds of corporate espionage. Conflict of interest. Something. Anything." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Let me talk to legal." By 5 p.m., the rumors were everywhere. The janitor was secretly rich. The janitor was taking down the company. The janitor was some kind of financial genius playing a long game. Nobody knew what was true, but everyone was talking. At 5:12 p.m., Malachi clocked out. The security guard looked at him differently now. "Heard some wild stuff today," the guard said. "People talk. They say you're not really a janitor." Malachi smiled. "What do you think?" "I think you're the only person in this building who knows what's actually happening." "Maybe." Malachi walked out into the cold evening. Behind him, Ashford Capital was imploding. Employees were updating resumes. Executives were scheduling crisis calls. The media was circling. And in 30 days, when the foreclosure became final, none of it would matter. Because the building would belong to someone else. At 7 p.m., Malachi's encrypted phone rang. "It's time," the voice said. "Legal's ready to file foreclosure documents." "File them," Malachi said. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "Malachi, once we do this, there's no going back. You understand that." "I understand perfectly." The call ended. Malachi looked out his apartment window at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere in that grid of lights was Ashford Tower. his tower. In 29 days, everyone would know. The next morning, the foreclosure notice was filed in New York County Court. Public record. Irreversible. Sterling saw it at 8:15 a.m. when his lawyer called. They're moving forward. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. We have 30 days to pay or vacate. Sterling hung up. Then he did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He cried. Not because he was losing money. Because he'd been beaten by someone he'd never taken seriously. And everyone was going to know. What Sterling didn't realize was that Keisha had already made copies of everything she'd found. Have you ever witnessed karma in real time? Comment below and hit subscribe so you don't miss the final chapters of this incredible story. The mandatory meeting was scheduled for Monday, 9 a.m. Every employee received the same email. No exceptions. Attendance required. By 8:45, the 47th floor conference room was packed. 312 people. Standing room only. Energy tense enough to taste. Margaret stood at the front. No presentation. No laptop. Just a single folder. I'll keep this brief, she said. As of Friday, foreclosure proceedings were initiated against this building. We have 28 days before ownership transfers. Gasps. Whispers. We're exploring all options, but I want to be transparent. The situation is critical. Some of you may lose your jobs. Some departments may be eliminated. We don't have all the answers yet. A hand went up. Junior analyst from research. Who bought the debt? A company called Rain Strategic Holdings. Another voice. Are they keeping us on? Or liquidating? We don't know. They haven't communicated their intentions. Sterling sat in the corner, not at the table. Demoted in everything but title. Marcus and Derek were gone. Resigned over the weekend before they could be fired. Jasmine was there, though, taking notes. Documenting everything. When will we know more? Someone asked. Soon. The new ownership is scheduling a meeting with senior staff this week. Until then, business continues as usual. How are we supposed to work when we don't know if we'll have jobs next month? Margaret didn't have an answer for that. The meeting ended at 9:47. People filed out in silence. At 10 a.m., Margaret's assistant knocked on her door. The new ownership wants to meet. Today, 2 p.m., this conference room. Did they say who's coming? Just one person. No name given. Margaret called her leadership team. Emergency prep meeting. 1 hour. Whoever's taking over this building, we need to present a united front. By 1:45, they were ready. 5 executives. 2 lawyers. A strategy to propose collaboration rather than confrontation. At 1:58, the conference room door was closed. At 2 o'clock, it opened. Malachi Rain stepped inside. Not in his janitor uniform. Charcoal suit. Tailored. Confident. Briefcase in hand. The room went silent. Margaret stood. I think you're in the wrong room. Malachi set his briefcase on the table. Opened it. Removed a folder. I'm not, he said quietly. He slid the folder across the table to Margaret. She opened it. Acquisition documents. Signed. Executed. Legal. Rain Strategic Holdings. Owner, Malachi J. Rains. Effective date of transfer, March 15th. Her hands started shaking. This is a joke. It's not. Sterling was on his feet. You can't do this. You're a janitor. I was a janitor, Malachi corrected. Now I'm your landlord. The lawyers started flipping through documents. Checking signatures. Looking for errors. There weren't any. How? Margaret's voice was barely audible. How did you do this? Malachi sat down. Calm. Measured. I spent 3 years in this building. Listening. Watching. Learning everything about how you operated. Your debt structure. Your risk management. Your arrogance. He looked at Sterling. You made it easy. Variable rate debt on a trophy acquisition. No hedging strategy. No contingency planning. You bet everything on rates staying low. You manipulated us. I observed you. There's a difference. Every decision you made was yours. I just knew what those decisions would lead to. Margaret leaned forward. What happens now? Are you liquidating the firm? No. Silence. You're not. I'm restructuring it. New leadership. New culture. New priorities. And what about us? One of the lawyers asked. Most of you will stay. If you're competent and willing to adapt. Malachi's eyes found Sterling. But some of you are done. Sterling's face had gone red. You can't fire me. I have a contract. Your contract has a termination clause for conduct detrimental to the company. We'll be invoking it. Effective immediately. On what grounds? Malachi pulled out another folder. Security footage. Slack messages. Documented instances of harassment and mockery directed at employees, including Malachi himself. You created a hostile work environment. You leveraged your position to humiliate subordinates. And your reckless financial management endangered every person in this building. He slid the folder to the lawyers. You're welcome to challenge it in court. But I have 3 years of documentation. Sterling stood there, speechless. Then he grabbed his phone and walked out. The door slammed behind him. Margaret was still processing. You bought this building to fire Sterling? I bought this building because it was undervalued and mismanaged. Firing Sterling is just good business. And the rest of us? Like I said, most of you stay. With changes. Malachi pulled out a third document. New compensation structure. Profit sharing for all employees, not just executives. Transparent financial reporting. Anonymous feedback systems. And a zero-tolerance policy for the kind of behavior that's been normalized here. He stood. I'll be moving into the executive office next week. My team will be reaching out to schedule individual meetings. If you want to stay, we'll find a role that fits. If you want to leave, we'll provide severance. He closed his briefcase. Any questions? Nobody spoke. Good. Meeting adjourned. Malachi walked out. The room stayed frozen for 30 seconds. Then chaos. Did that just happen? The janitor bought the company. Oh my God. Margaret sat down heavily. Her phone was already ringing. Board members, investors, media. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did they miss this? Downstairs, Sterling was in his office, throwing things into a box. Diplomas, awards, photos, everything that proved he'd mattered. His hands were shaking so badly, he dropped his Rolex. It shattered against the marble floor. He left it there. At 4:30 p.m., security escorted him out of the building. No ceremony, no goodbye, just a cardboard box and a long walk to the elevator. Employees watched through glass walls. Some looked away, others didn't. By 6 p.m., the story was everywhere. Former janitor buys Wall Street firm that mocked him. The headline went viral faster than Sterling's original video. Malachi didn't do interviews, didn't issue statements, just went back to work. Different work now, but work nonetheless. That night, Keisha got an email. Subject, meeting request. Ms. Morrison, I'd like to discuss a position on my restructuring team. Are you available tomorrow at 10 a.m.? M. Rains. She read it 3 times. Then she replied, I'll be there. At 11 p.m., Malachi was back in his Queens apartment. Same building, same view, but everything had changed. His phone rang. His sister. I saw the news, she said. Malachi, what did you do? I told you I was working towards something. You bought a building? I bought justice. She was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? I'm better than okay. I'm proud of you. I know. After they hung up, Malachi stood at his window, looking out at the city. Somewhere in those lights, Sterling Vance was probably drinking expensive scotch and planning his next move. It wouldn't matter, because the game was already over. And Malachi had won. But winning wasn't the point. The point was proving that invisible didn't mean powerless. That quiet didn't mean weak. That the people you ignore are the ones who see everything. What nobody knew yet was that Malachi had discovered something else during his 3 years at Ashford. Drop a comment if you believe in second chances and justice. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the final chapters reveal something nobody saw coming. The forensic audit started on Tuesday. Malachi brought in an outside firm, specialists in corporate fraud and financial misconduct. They arrived with warrants and hard drives and questions nobody wanted to answer. By Thursday, they'd found the first irregularity, a series of transactions from 18 months ago, buried in subsidiary accounts. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automated flags, but consistent, methodical, deliberate. Someone had been siphoning money from client accounts into a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The audit team presented their findings to Malachi at 3 p.m. Total amount is approximately $12 million over 14 months, the lead investigator said. Whoever did this knew exactly how to stay below detection thresholds. Who had access to these accounts? For people: Sterling Vance, Marcus Whitmore, Derek Pullman, and... She checked her notes. Jasmine Chun. Malachi leaned back. Chen's still here. Bring her in. At 4 p.m., Jasmine was escorted to what used to be Sterling's office. Malachi sat behind the desk. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Sit down, Miss Chun. She did. Hands folded in her lap. Face composed. I'm going to ask you a question, Malachi said. And I need you to be honest. Did you know about the transfers to the Cayman account? Yes. No hesitation. Malachi raised an eyebrow. You're admitting it? I found them 6 months ago. I was running reconciliation on a client portfolio and noticed discrepancies. I traced them back to the shell company. And you didn't report it? I tried. Jasmine's voice was steady. I brought it to Sterling. He told me I was mistaken. Said the transactions were legitimate fee structures I didn't understand because I was too junior. But you didn't believe him. No. So I kept digging. Quietly. I documented everything. Dates, amounts, authorization codes. I was building a case to take to the board. Why didn't you? Because I was scared. For the first time, her composure cracked. Sterling made it clear that if I pushed this, my career was over. He had connections. Influence. I was 26 years old with student loans. I convinced myself I'd find the right moment to act. Malachi studied her. Do you still have the documentation? She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Everything's here. Malachi took it, plugged it into his laptop. The files were immaculate. Spreadsheets, screenshots, email chains, a complete paper trail showing that Sterling had been systematically stealing from clients and covering it up. This is good work, Malachi said. Thank you. Why are you giving it to me now? Jasmine met his eyes. Because you're the first person in this building who might actually do something about it. Sterling's gone. His protection is gone. And honestly, she exhaled. I'm tired of being afraid. Malachi closed the laptop. You're not fired, Miss Chun. In fact, I'm promoting you. Head of Compliance. Your first job is working with the audit team to trace every dollar and identify everyone involved. What about criminal charges? That's not my decision. But I'll be forwarding everything to the SEC and the district attorney's office. Jasmine stood. Mr. Raines? Why did you really buy this building? You read the news. You know why. That's the story everyone's telling. I want to know the real reason. Malachi was quiet for a moment. 10 years ago, I lost everything trying to save my sister's life. I spent 3 years rebuilding. Not for revenge. For leverage. I wanted to prove that the system that chewed me up and spit me out wasn't as solid as it pretended to be. And now I'm going to fix it. Starting here. Jasmine left. Malachi sat alone in the office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The USB drive sat on his desk like a bomb. By Friday morning, the story had evolved. Janitor turned owner uncovers massive fraud at Wall Street firm. Sterling's name was everywhere. Not as the successful executive, as the target of a federal investigation. His lawyer released a statement denying everything. Nobody believed it. The evidence was too clean, too thorough. At 10 a.m., FBI agents arrived at Ashford Tower with a warrant for Sterling's personal records. By noon, they'd seized 6 computers, 4 phones, and 17 boxes of documents. Sterling wasn't arrested yet, but it was coming. At 2 p.m., Malachi held a company-wide meeting. 312 employees. Most of them terrified. Some of them angry. All of them confused. I know the last 2 weeks have been difficult, Malachi began. You've watched leadership change. Ownership change. The foundation of this company shake. He paused. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't about destroying Ashford Capital. It's about rebuilding it correctly. He pulled up a presentation. New organizational structure. Transparent compensation. Client protection protocols. Everyone in this room has a choice. You can stay and be part of something better. Or you can leave with dignity and a fair severance package. No judgment either way. A hand went up. Junior trader from derivatives. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't, Malachi said. Not yet. Trust is earned. I'm asking for time to prove that I mean what I say. Another hand. Senior analyst from research. What happens if we stay and it doesn't work? Then we fail together. But we fail trying to do things right. The room was quiet. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first. Then others joined. Not everyone, but enough. The meeting ended at 3:30. Keisha approached Malachi afterward. That was a good speech. It was honest. Same thing, in your case. She hesitated. I wanted to apologize for following you that night. It wasn't professional. You were doing your job. You saw something that didn't make sense, and you investigated. And now you're on my team. If you want to be. I do. Malachi nodded. Good. Because we have a lot of work ahead of us. That evening, the news broke. Sterling Vance had been arrested. Charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, securities fraud. Bail set at $5 million. His lawyer posted it within an hour. But the damage was done. Sterling's face was on every news outlet. Not smiling in a power suit. In a mugshot. Tired. Defeated. Human. The fall was complete. At 8 p.m., Malachi's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. You destroyed my life. Sterling's voice. Raw. Broken. No. Malachi said calmly. You did that yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. I'll fight this. Every charge. Every accusation. You should. That's your right. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Malachi hung up. He stood at his window, looking out at the city. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Restructuring a company. Restoring client trust. Building something that could last. But tonight, for just a moment, he let himself feel it. Not triumph. Relief. Because justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It just quietly corrects the scales and leaves everyone who doubted it wondering how they missed the shift. What Malachi didn't know was that one person had been watching everything from the beginning. What would you do if you had the power to restructure an entire company? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe and turn on notifications for the final chapter where everything comes full circle. 6 months later, Ashford Tower looked different. Not structurally. The marble floors were still Italian. The windows still offered views of the East River. But the energy had changed. The espresso machine on the 47th floor still hummed at 8:45 a.m. But the conversations around it were different now. Fewer jokes at someone else's expense. More actual work discussion. Jasmine Chun ran compliance with the efficiency of someone who'd been waiting years for the authority to do things right. Her team had recovered $8 million of the $12 million Sterling had stolen. The rest was tied up in legal proceedings that would take years. Sterling himself was awaiting trial. His legal team had filed 17 motions to dismiss. All denied. The evidence was too strong. The paper trail too clear. Marcus Whitmore had moved to San Francisco, working at a startup, keeping his head down. Derek Pullman had left finance entirely. Last anyone heard, he was selling real estate in Miami. Keisha Morrison was now director of strategic analysis. Her office had a view. Her salary had doubled. Her student loans were paid off. She arrived at work at 7:30 a.m. now. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. At 9 a.m., Malachi called a leadership meeting. 12 people around the table. Half of them were holdovers from the old regime. Half were new hires he'd brought in specifically for their integrity and competence. Q2 numbers are strong, the CFO reported. Client retention is at 87%. Better than projected. New client acquisition? Malachi asked. Up 40%. The publicity actually helped. People want to work with a firm that fired the corrupt executive. Malachi nodded. What about internal metrics? The head of HR pulled up a slide. Employee satisfaction scores are up across every category. Turnover is down. We've had 0 complaints filed with legal in 3 months. Keep monitoring it. Culture doesn't fix itself overnight. The meeting continued for 90 minutes. Strategy, operations, risk management. The things that should have always mattered more than ego. At 11 o'clock, Malachi returned to his office. It used to be Sterling's. He'd redecorated, removed the expensive art, the trophy photographs, the furniture designed to intimidate. Now it was functional, clean, a workspace, not a monument. His phone buzzed. Text from his sister. Doctor appointment went well. Numbers still stable. Love you. He smiled. Typed back. Love you too. Everything that had happened, every risk he'd taken, every quiet year of planning, it all came back to her. To proving that you could lose everything and still rebuild. That dignity wasn't tied to job titles. That the people who underestimate you are often the ones who need you most. At 1 p.m., there was a knock on his door. Come in. A young woman entered. Early 20s. Nervous energy. Resume in hand. Mr. Rains? I'm Destiny Clark. I have an interview scheduled for the analyst position. Sit down, Ms. Clark. She sat. Malachi reviewed her resume. Hampton University. Finance degree. Solid grades. 3 internships. Tell me why you want to work here, he said. Honestly, because of what you did. What I did. You rebuilt a company from the inside. You didn't just buy it and gut it. You made it better. That's the kind of place I want to work. Malachi set down the resume. What do you know about corporate restructuring? Not as much as I should, but I'm willing to learn. Good. Because if I hire you, you won't be analyzing spreadsheets in a cubicle. You'll be working directly with our transformation team. It's hard. It's messy. And it requires challenging people who've been doing things wrong for years. Destiny straightened. I can do that. Can you? Because the moment you start questioning the status quo, people will try to shut you down. They'll tell you you're too young, too inexperienced, too naive. Can you handle that? I've been handling that my whole life, Mr. Rains. Malachi smiled. You start Monday. After she left, he stood at his window. The city stretched out below. Millions of people, millions of stories. Some of them would rise. Some would fall. Most would just survive. But every once in a while, someone would do what Malachi had done. See a broken system, understand its mechanics, and fix it from the inside out. At 5 p.m., he left the office early, took the elevator down, walked through the lobby, nodded at the security guard. Have a good weekend, Mr. Rains. You too. Outside, the February evening was clear. Cold but not bitter. Malachi walked 6 blocks to the subway, down into the platform. Last car, same as always. Old habits. But now, instead of going home to run financial models in secret, he was just going home. To his apartment in Queens. Which he could afford to move out of now, but hadn't. Because it reminded him where he'd been. And why he'd fought so hard to change where he was going. The subway lurched forward. Malachi closed his eyes. Thought about Sterling, sitting in his lawyer's office, preparing for a trial he would probably lose. Thought about the 312 employees who still had jobs because someone had cared enough to fight for them. Thought about his sister, healthy and stable and proud of her brother. And he thought about the most important lesson he'd learned in 10 years of loss and rebuilding. Power isn't about who has the biggest office or the loudest voice. It's about who understands the system well enough to change it, who stays patient when everyone else panics, who remembers that beneath every title, every salary, every corporate structure, there are just people. And people, when given the chance, will choose dignity over dominance. Every time, the subway carried him home. Behind him, Ashford Tower stood against the Manhattan skyline. No longer a monument to someone else's ego, just a building. Where people worked, where justice had quietly corrected itself, where a janitor had become the most powerful person in the room simply by understanding that invisibility, when used correctly, was the ultimate advantage, and where, tomorrow morning at 5:12 a.m., the cleaning crew would arrive to start their shift. Different people now, but doing the same important work. That Malachi would never again take for granted. Because he remembered what it felt like to be the one nobody saw. And he'd spent 3 years making sure he'd never forget. The quiet ones don't rise loudly. They rise prepared. This is the end of Malachi's story, but it's just the beginning of what's possible when you refuse to stay invisible. Drop a comment sharing what this story meant to you. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we have more incredible stories of resilience, justice, and transformation coming soon. Your comment might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. Where are you watching from? Let us know below.